Good evening, everyone. I, Sanya Khatri, warmly welcome all of you on behalf of Forensic Fusion and White Crime to today's highly anticipated webinar on interrogation and interviewing in criminal investigations. It's a pleasure to have you join us from across the globe as we explore the details of interrogation and interviewing in criminal investigation and their critical role in uncovering the truth and delivering justice. It is an increasingly interconnected world. Effective interrogation and interviewing techniques are pivotal in criminal investigations, shaping the pursuit of truth and justice. However, this field is not without challenges, from ethical dilemmas to the reliability of obtained information. Today, we'll unpack these complexities and explore how investigators navigate the evolving landscape of criminal justice. Before starting, we have a few general instructions for everyone. First, you are requested to keep your cameras on and your mic muted during the lecture. Second, for any doubts or queries in between, please drop them in the chat box and they will be addressed during the Q&A session. I'm thrilled to welcome our esteemed speaker for today, Mr. Ivan Skiprop, respected dignitaries, and all attendees to this interactive webinar. In series of diverse guest lectures covering various aspects, we welcome you to our sixth guest lecture, and we are delighted to have you with us. Before we begin, I would like to introduce you to all Y Crime and Forensic Fusion. Y Crime, founded by Mr. Shakil Hassan, is a specialized crime news media house offering internship for forensic and law students that provides hands-on house training in cases, FIRs, RTIs, and in-depth case studies. Y Crime on the Crime app on the Google Play Stores cover categories like forensics, cybercrime, drug crime, and criminal law apart from daily crime news. The organization collaborates with the renowned crime journalists from India Today and the Aaj and regularly hosts webinars. Currently collaborating with Invisara Forensics and forensic psychologist Ms. Kripa Nisar on an exciting new project under development. Forensic Fusion, founded by Mr. Swapnil Bhattacharya, is the platform where curiosity meets expertise and knowledge break all boundaries. We are redefining forensic science education, making it accessible to everyone from budding enthusiasts to seasoned professionals. Through cutting edge content, immersive learning experiences, and expert guidance, we are on a mission to democratize forensic education. This dynamic setup has rapidly become a go-to platform for students, professionals, and enthusiasts alike. By offering free webinars, educational videos, and engaging content on platforms like YouTube, Forensic Fusion makes complex forensic concepts easy to grasp. The organization's commitment to excellence is reflected in its collaborative projects and the ability to bridge the gap between curiosity and professional expertise. Before the lecture begins, it is my honor to introduce today's esteemed speaker, Mr. Ivan Skiprop, a distinguishing criminologist and researcher. A graduate in criminology, Mr. Ivan Skiprop has made significant contribution to the field, including his publication exploring the link between religion and crime in Bungoma country, Kenya. His research interests encompass forensics, criminal justice, and victimization, reflecting his dedication to advancing knowledge in these critical areas. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kiprop into our webinar.
Thank you for the introduction. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Evans Kiprop from Kenya. So after the brief introduction, I'll be talking about this topic of interrogation and interviewing aspects in criminal investigations. So before I share my slides, I want to thank the organizers of this event. right now in Kenya, we are preparing for the festive season, but because of this passion for academics, so I have to do this lecture. So let me share my slides. Is it visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So let me go straight to the presentation. So there is the presentation for the guest lecture on 22nd December 2024, Forensic Fusion and White Crime Online India. The topic is aspects of interviewing and interrogation in criminal investigation by yours truly. So that's my email if you want to reach me later. So I'm amply requesting if you have a question, so you can put on the chat box, and then we can discuss it after the presentation, because I don't want that kind of interruption in between. But if you have a burning question, you can chip in. Amply requesting. So let's dive straightly to the presentation. So introduction. This case lecture focuses on the aspects of interviewing and interrogation of criminal investigation. The attention of this great topic lies on the following subtopics, which I'll be going to delve deeply later. One is the philosophy of interrogation and interviewing in criminal investigation. Number two, we have the methodological approaches to interrogation and interviewing. Number three, we have the principles of interrogation and interviewing, which is family known as the Mendes principles, which is named after a scholar named Mendes. And then another one is the achieving best evidence, which we call the ABE system, from victims and witnesses. And lastly, the future of interviewing and interrogation. So because every study has a future, for example, if forensic science has a future, criminology has a future, psychology has a future, then we have advancing science and practice. Investigations are about looking into the events of the past with the knowledge of today, whether the past is years or minutes ago. The range of investigative tools available to police and law enforcement agencies around the world is ever expanding. For example, forensic investigations have fundamentally changed over the decades with the knowledge of DNA and digital evidence. For you who are doing forensic science, you know the issue of, for example, the issue of DNA fingerprinting, the evolution of science. We have also forensic, we have digital evidence for mobile devices and computers, giving investigators and their agencies valuable information. But the core of all investigations remains our ability to obtain information. So the core objective is to obtain information. Despite scientific progress, technical evidence may be inconclusive or not available. Thus, so they have highlighted the main purpose of interviewing and interrogation. So the main purpose is, the core requirement is to establish the facts or event in question. So for example, if you are interrogating a child, if you are interrogating certain victims, certain witnesses, so the objective of that interrogation interview is to obtain evidence, is obtain facts related to the events in question. For example, if there is a crime, for example, murder, or crimes, for example, crimes against morality, for example, sexual offenses, or any other offense. But it continues there, it says, but there are more profound reasons why the interview remains vital. Victims and witnesses of crime have both the right to be heard. So later, we'll delve into the issue of vulnerability aspect, the rights of victims, the rights of witnesses. For example, the issue of Miranda warnings, Miranda rights. So I know most of you knows about that principle. For example, in the United States, in the UK, how does the police utilize the issue of Miranda rights? The standards of interviewing and interrogation. Kindly unmute. So again, it continues at saying victims and witnesses of. Can I continue? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So victims and witnesses of crime have both the right to be heard and have the crimes acknowledged and fully investigated. Now, that is now the issue of science coming in. Interviews with suspects of crime can, in many cases, provide the motive and explanations needed to determine the culpability, but also to provide the closure to victims and their families. This is the chronology. For example, if you want to give support to victims and their families, for example, in the criminal justice system chain. So, for example, if a crime has been committed, for example, murder, obviously it produces victims, be it primary victims, be it secondary victims, be it tertiary victims. So on that process, on that chain from the police to the prosecution to the courts to the correctional settings. So we have this issue of right closure to victims. For example, if they have received compensation or they have achieved, for example, substantive justice at the end of it all, and their families. Families, for example, they are secondary victims, but there exist different types of. I know most of you who are doing criminology know there are different types of victims. We have secondary victims, primary victims, tertiary victims, especially in the field of victimization. So this anthological presentation will give insights on the aspects of interrogation and interviewing investigation. We have the definition of key concepts. We have criminal investigation. This is the applied science used by law enforcement officers and forensic persons to unravel the cause of different types of criminal offenses. I know most of you know what is criminal investigation. That's the basic definition. We have forensics. Most of you who are doing forensics, being forensic medicine, digital forensics, forensic entomology. It is a Latin word from forensics, meaning of the forum, in end of quote, in reference to places where the locals of ancient Rome were held. That is the historical view. We have forensic science. This refers to the application of science to legal matters in trying to address particular concerns that arise in the legal setting. I know most of you have different or varied definition of forensic science. For example, I have an article here, which I'll show you later. It is called the Forensic International article. So they give a different definition of forensic science. But when I was preparing for this lecture, I did the basic definition of forensic science so that most of you can understand. We have interrogation and interviewing. It is used interchangeably concepts of establishing the facts and evidence from suspect and witnesses in relation to commission and omission of different types of offenses. Then we delve now to the discussion. That was the introduction part of it. So at least you have gotten the concepts which we are going to discuss. We have the philosophy of interviewing and interrogation, because every field of study, be it forensic medicine, it has its philosophy. Digital forensic has its philosophy. If it is criminology, it has its philosophy. For example, we are talking about the classical philosophy. We have the neoclassical philosophy, the positivist philosophy. So interviewing and interrogation has its own philosophy. One is the scientific philosophy. And in my discussion, this is the approach. The 19th century philosopher and scientist Charles Peirce proposed 4 ways that people acquire knowledge or beliefs. We have the tenacity, authority, reason, and science. Tenacity refers to the believing of something because we have always believed it, with little or no scrutiny of the validity of that belief. Authority is when we rely on others as a source of information, and reasons refers to relying on our own logic, intuition, and reasoning. Personal experience is when we acquire the beliefs and knowledge via direct personal experience or our informed observation. Systemic empiricism, or what is commonly referred to as science, is the acquisition of information by way of systematic information. To go about testing or answering the research question, a researcher does the following. So this is the scientific philosophy. For those of you who are in this field of criminology, psychology, forensic science, I know you do practicals, you do research. For example, me, I'm a researcher of criminology and criminal justice, so I do this kind of studies. For example, me, I do mixed methods of research. I do both qualitative and quantitative, but majorly I'm onto qualitative studies. So here we are talking about, for example, if you categorize, for example, quantitative and qualitative research, there's what you call the issue of hypothesis. Developing an hypothesis, we have two different types of hypotheses. We have the null and alternate hypothesis. I know most of you knows that because there are basic studies of research. It is testing the relationship between different variables. One variable, we can talk of independent variable. Another one is the dependent variable. If you are doing, for example, quantitative research, qualitative research. Number two, we have what we call determine which methodology they use to test the hypothesis. Number three is design a study that manipulates or measures the variable of interest. So you design a study. We talk about another one, determine what population they will draw their sample participants from. For example, if you are focusing, for example, focus group discussion, which population are you focusing? For example, if you are interviewing, for example, you are interviewing children, which protocol are you using? What population, for example, if these adults, if they are children, if they are middle-aged people, so you must determine what population you draw their sample, collect and analyze data. You use different instruments of collecting data and analyze, and analytical tools, compare results to the hypothesis, if there is a relationship, if there is a variance. So you test, you compare the results, draw objective conclusion while acknowledging the limitation of the study, because every study has limitations. A case example, a researcher might be interested to know in whether certain interview techniques are related to the amount of information an interview discloses, or whether an age of interviewee is related to suggestibility. For example, if you see the concept of suggestibility, I'll show you later about, for example, when interviewing children, you use, for example, when you are using, for example, questions such as, if you are using closed-ended or open-ended questions, or you are using probing questions, like, for example, what, when, the W, the 5 Ws and H, how. So you use this concept, for example, suggestibility. So there you say, or whether an age of interviewee is related to suggestibility. And then we go to the second philosophy, which is the peace model philosophy. I think it is clear from your end. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So because I don't want you to miss these philosophies, because they are very important philosophies when studying investigation interview, because most of you are practitioners in this field, most of you are students in this field. So there is the peace model philosophy. The development of the peace model is inextricably linked to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which is what we call the PACE Act of England and Wales, and was introduced in response to a growing perception that the public had lost confidence in the criminal justice system. The media response to a group of sensational cases highlighted unacceptable police behavior and revealed the existence of miscarriages of justice in criminal, principally terrorist trials that took place during the 1970s. Later, I'll show you, for example, the use of cognitive interview, the CI principle. And then I'll show you, for example, if this concept of existence of miscarriages of justice in criminal, for example, criminal investigation. For example, when there exists the issue of by the police to a suspect to provide evidence, and then the use of interrogation. So I'll show you later. So there is this prominent case I've highlighted. There are other prominent, such as the Republic versus Latimer. There is similar issues about confessions alleged to have been extracted by oppressive behavior and violence during police interviews with the suspects. So for example, if you study this peace model philosophy, it will show you some case studies. For example, this one, I'll show you later how it went, but at the end of the discussion, because I don't want to delve there right now. So we have this linear model. This is a linear model for how the flow of events, the peace model. So we have the Republic versus Latimer. We have 1972, 1975. We have the Fisher Report, 1977. We have the Royal Commission on Criminal Procedure, 1977 to 1981. And then we have the PSE Act of 1984. So before I go to the peace acronym, the discussion, the whole discussion about it, I want just to highlight something which I didn't put in my presentation, but it's very important for you to know how these models came about, how these structured models. For example, how the peace model came about. For example, in 1940s, before 1940s, we have a model by a guy called S-sharp model. Then we came to the 1950s. We have the Reid technique. Most of you who do criminology know this model very well. It is an interrogation model, but now because of the transition to issues of science, the evolution of interrogation interviewing, we have gone to the issue of investigative interviewing model. Then we have in the 1970s, we have, for example, in the US, we have this model called the FLETC. It is an acronym again. It means the Federal Law Enforcement Technical Training Centers. It is in US. Then we have the 1984 CECI. We have the 1990s. 1990s now is the protocol which was used to interview children. It is called the NHICD. It is called the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development Protocol. So later I'll share with you a book which I use for this presentation. It's a good book. It's almost 500 pages. It shows how this protocol was used, the aspect of this protocol, the testability of this protocol, the relevance of this protocol to investigation and interviewing. Then we come to 1992. We come now to the peace model, which is now here. I'll show you. So get in mind that peace model came in 1992. Then we have 1994, we have the price model, 202, the cylinder model, and ABE system, which I earlier introduced, which you call the achieving best evidence. Then we come to 205, strategic use of evidence. For example, the use of strategic use of evidence. For example, if you want to get, for example, the passive and the active liars or truth tellers. For example, in an interview, the issue of deception. I know most of you know, if you want to interview somebody, or if you are talking with somebody, you can use, for example, non-verbal aspects of behavior. You know, you will see how a person behaves, or when you interview, you will see how he's behaving. For example, there is the difference between passive and active forms of behavior. For example, you can tell this person is telling the truth. You can tell this person is telling lies. For example, when you are interviewing or interrogating a suspect. So how do you get that? For example, you test some theory. There are some theory behind that. So these are strategic use of evidence. So that is a key area. I'll delve later into it. Then we come to 206. We have the AI stroke SWIT model. 2013 now, we transition to what we call the orbit model. This is now what we call issue of rapport. How do you maintain rapport with the suspect? How do you deal with the rapport of the suspect? What is the relevance of rapport in investigation and interviewing? Then, so these are linear timeline. How these models came about, the structured models from the 1940s to 2021, where we have now the Mendes principles, which I'll delve later into it. Then you will see how these principles are relevant to the issue of interrogation and interviewing. So that linear model, I'll share you the text later via the WhatsApp, and then you will study how this model came about. So we have the flow of events, the peace model. There are two fundamental aspects of peace model: to obtain accurate and reliable information from suspect, witnesses, or victims in order to establish the truth about the matter and the investigation. And interviews were to be approached with an open mind, with information elicited from the interviewee tested against available evidence known or capable of being reasonably established. So peace model, it came in the year 1992. So these are mnemonic acronym for the individual phases to be followed and applied investigating. So peace, P stands for planning and preparation. I think it is visible. I've highlighted there what is the relevance of this peace model. We have engage and explain. We have account, clarification, and challenge. We have a clarification, and then we have a evaluation, E, at the end of it all. So planning, this is the vital part of investigative interviewing, whether the victim, witness, or suspect interviewing officer must first consider how the interview might contribute to the overall investigation. So this is the first critical stage. How do you plan? The interviewing officers will have a clear understanding of the purpose of the interview and should consider when and where it will take place. So now these are critical area, because you must know what is the purpose of this interview, what is the objective of this interview, which information do I want to derive from the suspect, which information do I want to get from the suspect. So the interview officer should have a clear understanding of the purpose of the interview and should consider when and where it will take place. So the place, if you are familiar with the place or not familiar, so you must consider, you must take into consideration about. So that's the relevance of the planning and preparation. We come to the engage and explain. This is the first main phase of the actual interview and involves opening of the interview and building rapport with the interviewee. So I'd explain about how do you consider rapport. You use what you call the orbit model, which I will show you later. The orbit, how do you maintain rapport? What is the relevance of rapport in this investigative? And this phase is crucial to the interviewer overall success. However, anecdotal evidence suggests this phase is not given the attention it deserves. Hope you are many of you get this point. Interviewee should also use appropriate language, avoid legal jargon, complex legal terminologies or what. Then should be flexible in their approach and try to create a relaxed atmosphere, reassuring the interview if necessary. All individuals present in the interview room should be introduced and role explained. So that is the key aspect there of engage and explain. So first is the planning and preparation. Then we come to engage and explain. Number 3, we have account clarification and challenge. The aim of this phase is to gain much information as possible and interviewee own words. And this helps increase accuracy and consistency. So after engaging and explaining the suspect, then you come now to, you clarify the information. If you didn't hear very well, you clarify. If there's some mismatch in the information, you just clarify. If there's a challenge, then now you can see how to deal with that challenge. Interviewers should obtain a free recall from the interview and subdivide the account into subsection to probe for further detail or clarify details provided. There's an aspect called probing. Then we come to, because at first I told you there are some questions you can use. For example, there's what we call the probing questions. These are the who, what, when, where, which, and now. For example, if you are interviewing a suspect, for example, murder, you can use these questions. For example, who was there, what happened, when, where, which, and how. How did it happen? So for you to get some details. So we have closure. This phase involves the interviewers summarizing what has occurred during the interview to ensure that there is mutual understanding about what has taken place. I have highlighted the relevance there. This is an ideal opportunity to verify that all aspects have been sufficiently covered with the interviewee and second interview, if appropriate. So that's the relevance of closure. Then we have evaluation. This is the last phase. So you evaluate now the whole process. Was it positive or negative? What is the outcome now? You evaluate how the process went, because I need someone to be in the chat box. Later we'll discuss what is evaluate. What is the essence of evaluation? Because every field you must evaluate the process. For example, you are doing research, you must evaluate your results at the end of it all. So, for example, if you are interviewing a study, for example, if you are going to a correctional setting, say prison, and then you are getting data from prisoners, these offenders who have been say they have been imprisoned for life imprisonment or a determinate sentence, for example, 30 years, 25 years. So if you are getting data from them, how do you evaluate the process at the end of it all? What evaluation models do you use? So, for example, investigative and interviewing, after the whole process, after getting information, closure, all of them, so you evaluate now. So this phase is vitally important for the interviewer and his manager, supervisor. It's not just the evaluation of how much information was obtained or whether a conviction was obtained. If a suspect that it should include the interviewers and appropriate supervisors, evaluating performance including question asked, information obtained, whether sufficient rapport was established. This is very important. Whether empathy was used throughout and whether all aspects of the model were upheld. I've highlighted the relevance of evaluation there. There are 3. One is ensure the interview is complying with the appropriate policies and practices. For example, there is what you call interview and interrogation standards. If you have, it is in line with the Mendes principles, include legislative practices. Second, this stage allows for the interview to be examined within the context of the aims and objectives and for further areas of investigation to be identified. If there are some gaps, you do an evaluation, you fill those gaps. Third, Third is in addition to the procedural aspect of the forensic interview, there is a critical part I will show you later again. There's what you call the forensic interview trace, FIT. This is another area for critical area for interviewing and interrogation. So conducting an effective evaluation allows the interview to reflect upon their own practice and consider what, if any, improvements to be made. That's the relevance of evaluation. So in the chat box, you can someone to tell us what is the difference between evaluation and research. That is one. Number two, if there is overlapping grounds of where do evaluation and research overlap? Because now we are talking about interviewing and interrogation. So what is the difference? What is the distinction between evaluation and research? Where do evaluation and research converge or diverge in terms of principles, in terms of models of research? So if someone knows, you can highlight it in the chat box, and then we can discuss, because these are very important issue. It cut across because there is no discipline. You can't go about do away with the evaluation. We call the evolution of suspect interview training in the United States of Federal Law Enforcement. So we have the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Federal Law Enforcement Training, established in 1970, provide basic and advanced training to law enforcement professionals from over 90 federal, state, local, tribal, and interview law enforcement agencies. The FLETC proposes for a 5-stage step interview, which was used to guide the trainees when interviewing suspect victims and witnesses. So though the font is not quite visible, but I hope you can see from your end. You can see this diagram. Yes?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So step one, we have the introduction. Step two, we have rapport. We have step three, questioning. Step four, summary. Then step five, close. So in this step one, which is introduction, we have planning. Then we have examining case and suspect information. Prepare a statement of purpose prior to interview. How do you prepare for the interview? Develop team based on the case and suspect information. For example, if you want to get information from a murder suspect, what is the team? The team there is about what? The murder team. So know how to extract information from a suspect related to murder, robbery with violence, or any other case which you are doing investigation or interrogation. Consider interview setting, custodial or non-custodial. For example, if someone is in custody or someone is not in custody, beginning the interview, deliver a purpose statement. Then we go to the second stage there, because rapport. How do you maintain rapport? You use what you call the open model, which I earlier shown you. One is establish common ground to build rapport, observe baseline behavior, components of effective communication. How do you deal with that? Self-awareness, clarity of expression, self-disclosure, active listening, establish and maintain rapport. Then we come to the line of questioning. How do you use open-ended question, close-ended question, probing questions? That is the area. Transitioning statement. You have open-ended question, verbal and non-verbal cues to deception. Earlier I told you about what you call non-verbal issues of behavior. For example, maintaining eye contact with the suspect. You will judge that this person is lying or saying the truth. So use verbal or non-verbal. Specific question, direct the specific question. For example, where did this happen? So specific question. Suspect interview, you do what you call monologue, disclose evidence, teams, handle denials, choice assumptive questions, 6 admission, 6 confession. Then we have summary, summarize, follow-up investigation, request written statement. Then we have close. So we have explain forthcoming processes, acknowledge cooperation, leave door open for additional questions. So if there is room for additional questions from the suspect, then you can highlight there. So we come to the critical part now, which is the principles of interviewing and interrogation. These are widely accepted principles of interviewing and interrogation, named after, there is a guy called Mendes principles. Mendes. I'll share you a text on these principles, and then you see how it was extracted. And then because it is a widely accepted principle, it is used now. For example, if you are in a field of investigation and interrogation, it is these principles. They are guiding principles. They are very useful. The Bennett's principle of effective interview for investigation information represent a crucial achievement in the evolution of non-coercive interviewing and interrogation as a key stage of due process, the justice system, and within them, the search of truth, published in May 2021. Before I started the discussion, I told you about that the linear model, about the structured models, how it came about from the first, which was in 1940s, to the 2021 model now, which is the principle of interviewing and interrogation by Mendes. So it says the principle aims to propose concrete alternative to interrogation methods that rely on coercion to extract confession. So interrogation methods now is not used because they are perceived to be coercive. They are non-scientific because now we are transitioning to the field of to the age of science. They provide guidance on obtaining accurate and reliable information in full respect of the human rights and dignity of all, including through the implementation of legal and procedural safeguards in the first hours of police custody. By the time of writing, the principles have been endorsed and welcomed by the UN Subcommittee of Prevention of Torture. So it is widely accepted principles. Then so now, the Mendes principle in the evolution of interview practice, how did it came about? The applicability of this principle. Prior to the development of the principle, interview practice itself had not been informed or monitored through the lens of international standards. Rather, it had been a prerogative of different agencies themselves, like the police, intelligence, military, and security. This is true for the state parties to the 1984 UN Convention Against Torture and Other Inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, which provides that law enforcement personnel, military, medical personnel, public officials, and any other persons may involve in the custody, interrogation, or treatment of any individual subjected to any form of arrest, detention, or imprisonment should be educated on the prohibition of torture. Article 10, if you see Article 10 of the UN Convention Against Torture, it says, as well as each party state shall keep under systematic review of interrogation rules, instructions, method, and practice. Article 11. I've just highlighted there for you to get the concept there of the convention of the UN. So one, we have the principle one, which is the foundations. Here, I'll not delve into the details, but there's a key area I've highlighted. The first principle establishes that most effective interviews are based on empirical scientific studies, international legal standards, and value-based professional duties. For example, if you are now seeing the future of interrogation and future of interrogation and interview, so it must conform to these principles. Empirical scientific studies, one. Two is the international legal standards, conformity to international legal standard, and values-based professional duties. For example, values of research and practice. So these are the values now which are considered there. The increasing democratization of the interview knowledge, skill, and process is underscored by including international human rights expertise and empirical research equal to the discipline of policing and the skill and experience of the investigator as grounding for new practice. For example, the issue of Miranda law. I know most of you who are in this field of criminology, forensic science, psychology, know what is Miranda. Miranda rights, Miranda warnings. For example, the issue of a suspect. You are interrogating a suspect. These rights, for example, this majorly, it was historically, if you study, for example, the Miranda law, it came about, there is a certain case study in the US. So there is this aspect that you have a right to remain silent. Number two, any information or anything you say, for example, a suspect, that information will be used against him or her in a court of law. Number three is that there's this provision, there's this element of what we call in Miranda law, right of representation. For example, during the interview or interrogation, a suspect can be represented by an attorney or a lawyer. So those are the key aspects of Miranda warning. So that is the key area that was discussed here. The legal safeguards are well known, albeit often poorly applied, and include the right to information about the reason for arrest, right to remain silent, which I was telling you, and any charges at the time of arrest. There's also a key area of ethics for the interviewer, cautioning against the dangers of expediency and affirming the values of fairness, honesty, and lawfulness. So that is the principle number one, foundations. Number two, on practice, this principle shifts the understanding from the interview as a singular event to that of a complete process, encompassing all interaction between the interviewer and interviewee at all stages. Legitimacy is conditional but can withdraw at any point. So the relevance of this principle is it sets out the process and effective interview would likely to include preparation and planning. Earlier I talked about ensuring legal relevant safeguards are applied throughout, establishing and maintaining rapport, and ultimately assessment and analysis of information gathered. So we have the relevance of that principle. We are talking about now the issue of vulnerabilities. I was talking earlier about the issue of suspect vulnerability, suspect victims, but now there are tenets of how do you consider tenets to consider when getting information. For example, vulnerable suspects. For example, you are talking about age. For example, a minor. So how do you go about getting information from a minor, a child, for example? For example, earlier I told you about what you call the NHICD protocol. How do you carry that information? How do you use prompting questions? How do you use the element of suggestibility in children? So this principle introduces a key valuable addition to interviews and human rights law in pinning out down the importance of risk assessment throughout the interview process. Risk assessment are recognized as critical intervention in planning complex operation and ensuring rights are upheld. So there we are talking about the principle articulate the importance of carrying out a risk assessment to assess the vulnerability of the interviewee. Again, is the matrix of factors in order to assess the special needs that may be required to support the interview in a specific context. This understanding of vulnerability requires a less formalistic and more individualized and adaptive assessment, not only by interviewers themselves, but also later by judicial assessment of the reliability and voluntariness of the statements or evidence. So I've highlighted there the relevance of vulnerabilities. We have training. For example, what we are doing here, we are training ourselves on how to approach the issue of interrogation and interview. So every field has training. If you are in the field of forensic science, training, criminologist training, psychology training, every field, dentistry training, building on the realization of all kinds of specialist skills that need to be available in an interview. This principle situates effective interviewing as the learned skill requiring specialist training. For example, me as a criminologist, if I was not trained, for example, at the campus level by my lecturers, I couldn't have been presenting like this because, you know, you must have these skills, training, learning every day, reading some, yeah. So to get training, for example, you cannot get information from a suspect or a witness or a victim. You are not trained. You must get trained, get some these skills, get some these basic skills on how to get information. How do you communicate? These communication skills. How do you communicate to a suspect? How do you communicate to a witness? Number 5, we call accountability. Transparency and accountability are captured in the 5th principle. This value lies in the art of promoting an organizational culture accountable for its action. I've highlighted there. You can see it is visible. This principle outlines an holistic approach to accountability that includes effective record keeping and monitoring of independent assessment and systems of accountability remedy, including redress and non-repetition. So there we are talking about the relevance of accountability. It is self-explanatory. We have about implementation, the principle number 6. Finally, the 6th principle outlined the roles of mandates holders in implementation from a review of domestic frameworks as required by Article 11 of United Nations Convention Against Torture, UNCAT, to building institutional capacity for effective interviewing and interrogation. The relevance here we are talking about articulates the broad-based multi-institutional and legal framework necessary for the full implementation of the principles. So those are the key principles of interrogation and interviewing. It is used widely around the globe. So there's another key area now. We talk about common research methodological approaches. Here we are talking about the research. How do you do research now? Because every field now we are transitioning the issue of science. So for example, criminology now, what is the intersection between criminology and forensic science? What is the intersection between criminology and psychology? What is the intersection between, for example, criminalistics, for example, and forensic science? So we are transitioning to the field of science. You can't do anything without science. So even investigative interviewing, you take this approach by way of science. How do you collect data from the field? For example, how do you collect data from, for example, issues of terrorism? Applying the aspect of, for example, cognitive interview, the CI. How do you apply, for example, the peace model, the price model? How do you apply? But now you apply by use of what you call science. For example, there is one what you call laboratory studies, the triangulation. We have we are talking about 3 laboratories, self-reports from experienced practitioners. So one is the laboratory studies. The most common methodology utilized by researchers studying interviewing has been laboratory studies or experiments. One of the hallmark features of laboratory experiment is that the researcher systematically controls and manipulates what occurs during the study. But now, how do you control and manipulate? By using of different instruments. In a basic experimental design, there are 2 variables studied, independent and dependent variable. To those of you who are in the research field, like me, most of you are in this platform who are into research, if it is quant research or qual research, so you know how to test these variables. So even investigative interviewing, for example, here there is this concept. The major strength of laboratory research is the ability of researchers to examine causality. What is the cause? Or as opposed to being simply to determine whether 2 variables are associated, there is that relationship, or correlated in other ones in a well-designed experiment. The researcher cannot determine not only the X and Y variables are related, but whether X causes Y. What causes terrorism? For example, what causes murder? So you must test using laboratory study. So there's a text I will share later. It will you will see how these laboratory studies are being conducted. There's what we call self-report studies. This methodology focuses on the use of surveys, in-depth interviews, and focus groups about interviewing and interrogation, especially the use of surveys, in-depth interview. This now in the area of qualitative research. The major benefit of self-report studies is that researchers are able to learn about the practice direct from experts in the field. Generally, self-report studies ask practitioners how often they employ a set of techniques, how they approach different types of interviewees, or their attitudes regarding various aspects of conducting interviews. Furthermore, self-report studies offer insight into this is the relevance now, decision-making process of interviewers and interviewees that is otherwise unknowable while simply observing an interview. Use of observation. And then we come to the field studies. Arguably, the least common methodology employed by studying interview is known as field studies. So this is the least methodology, or the systematic observation of the actual phenomena, its naturally occurring environment. In this area, nearly all observations have been conducted using an official record of an interview, primarily transcripts, but researchers are increasingly receiving access to audio and visual recordings that allow for a more naturalistic way to observe the interaction between interviewer and interviewee. For example, you use what you call if you are using audio, then later you can do what you call you do coding, then a transcription. For most of you who do research, they know what is the meaning of how do you code. You do coding of that data. How do you do transcription of data? So that is the least field. So there are 3. The triangulation, we have the field studies, laboratory, and then reports. The last area is what we call the achieving best evidence from victims and witnesses. It is called the ABE system. So in this discussion, because at the end of it all, you want to get evidence from victims and witnesses, because this evidence you'll use in a court of law. You process this victim, for example, if he's guilty or not guilty, because at the end of it all, you want the objective lies there to achieving a guilt or not guilty objective of this aspect. So there's what you call achieving best evidence. There's another concept which I told you earlier, the strategic use of evidence. For example, interrogation. So the evidence of victims and witnesses is pivotal for successful criminal prosecution. The quality of evidence is often relied upon by the prosecution in proving their case. However, the reality is that many witnesses are children, vulnerable, or intimidated, and so require assistance in providing their best evidence, both at the investigation and trial phases. For example, if there is this text there, I don't know if most of you see. I don't see on my part. So can you see that text?
Yes, sir.
You can see?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Yes. So this text, I'll share with you this text. It is called what you call. It is called Interviewing Investigate. This is the official journal of the International Investigative Interviewing Research Group. This is a text. It is called Exploring Supportive Interviewing Practices. So I'll share you this text. For example, if you are interviewing children, how do you test that protocol? Supporting vulnerable.
Hello, sir. Sir, I think you're not audible. Hello, sir. It's okay, participants. I have already seen your messages. You are requested to have some patience. Sir would definitely, I guess, rejoin the meeting. Just give us a few moments.
Power has gone off. Please be patient. We'll join in a few minutes.
Am I audible?
Sir, yes, sir.
Sorry for the interruption.
Yes, sir.
There was a power blackout, so and I had not recharged my laptop. So, but we are at the tail end. So let me finish. Then we can do some discussion. So I think it is feasible. Can I continue?
Yes, sir.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yes. So I was talking about the ABE system. So this ABE system, it is achieving best evidence from victims and witnesses. So the evidence of victims and witnesses is pivotal for successful criminal prosecution. The quality of evidence is often relied upon by the prosecution in proving their case. However, the reality is that many witnesses are children, vulnerable, or intimidated. So they require assistance in providing their best evidence, both at the investigation and trial phases. To those of you who have done industrial practice, for example, in courts, in these investigative agencies, you know how do you do investigation. For example, you are doing investigation at a crime scene. How do you collect evidence? How do you reconstruct the crime scene? How do you preserve that evidence to be used in a court of law? So that is the whole aspect of investigation. How do you collect evidence? There are different types of, for example, physical evidence. How do you collect physical evidence? And trial phases. Trial phases, for example, if you go to, for example, courts. For example, I think courts operate the same way globally. For example, even if you go to your country, India, even if you come to my country, Kenya, there's those procedural aspects. For example, if you are going for a mention pre-trial, you are going for a trial or post-trial. So those are the key procedures. But now you are utilizing the evidence used, which you have obtained from investigation. So these investigation and trial phases, they are interlinked, because what you obtain from interrogation interviewing suspects, you will use that kind of evidence in a court of law. As such, there is reliance on the criminal justice system to be able to accommodate and understand their needs. So these vulnerability needs. So we go to the last aspect. In England and Wales, the interviewing of children and vulnerable witnesses is underpinned by the guidance produced by the UK Ministry of Justice, Achieving Best Evidence in Criminal Justice, the ABE system. So we have the developing best evidence in criminal justice proceedings. Then we have the overview of the ABE. So the overview, we are talking about the planning and preparation for the APE. How do you plan and prepare? Then we have initial contact with the witness, the first initial contact. Number 3, we have planning information. Then this is the key area, conducting the ABE interview. How do you achieve best evidence from the suspect? So what you do what you call maintaining rapport. There's what you call free recall, questions and closure. It's almost similar to the peace model, but now there is a different key facets of ABE system. One is rapport, engage and explain. One is do what you call preliminaries. For example, you know the place, where do you conduct this interview, what is the purpose of this interview, what is the objective of interview. We have the ground rules, we have the preview and neutral topics. Then this is another linear model again. Then we have talking about the free narrative account, initiate and support. Then it goes to what you call incident and offenses, questioning and clarification, and then closure. So it resembles the peace model. So these models, though it occurs during different years, but they are the same. They are the same models. They are the same models. They don't differ in terms of principles, in terms of the structure. So they don't differ. It's only there are some only maybe key distinguishable facets of maybe peace model, the price model, the NHGID protocol. So, but in terms of principle and practice, it is the same. We have the future of interviewing and interrogation. This is the last part now. So what is the future of interviewing and interrogation? As discussed in various sections of this anthological presentation, there has been much debate by academic researchers and practitioners around the world concerning the use of the terms interrogation and interviewing, but they are almost the same. But now there is this shift. For example, interrogation, it is perceived to be it is a coercive principle. For example, police officers, if they are using interrogation, but now the objective of interrogation is to coerce a suspect to produce certain information. But there is this shift to what you call interviewing, investigative interviewing, which is non-coercive. So there is this distinction between interrogation and interviewing. So though they are used interchangeably in this field of interrogation interviewing, but the principle behind interrogation is that interrogation is a coercive method, but interviewing is non-coercive. So that is the distinction. So you must get the two terms. But in terms of studies, for example, if you are conducting studies of interrogation interviewing, if you are doing a paper, these concepts are used interchangeably in this field. But now they draw the line, because interrogation was used long time ago many years ago. But now transitioning into science, we use investigative interviewing. However, regardless of which term used, the outcome should reflect the full exercise of legal rights past personal stage of contact with public information, regardless of whether such encounters are labeled conversation, interrogation, interviewing, or questioning. So these are just concepts, but almost the same. Such interviews are extraordinarily rich and dynamic psychological environments. They involve social judgments of trustworthiness and reliability. So the future lies on these key areas: the psychology of rapport, the OPIT method. How do you maintain rapport? What do you call maintaining what you call empathy with the accused, with the suspects or witnesses? There's what you call the challenge of advancing science and practice. How do you advance science and practice? How do you confront that challenge? There's what you call the pitfalls of using non-scientific methods. For example, if you are using non-scientific methods, at the end of it all, the outcome will be non-scientific. And right now, scientists, they don't consider these non-scientific methods. There's that transition to science, the modern science of, for example, issues. For example, if you are conducting a research on DNA fingerprinting, that is science. For example, you are collecting evidence from a crime scene, you must use science method. For example, if you are reconstructing a crime scene, you use science method. For example, if you are doing, for example, investigation, or for example, if there is a CSI, I know most of you know crime scene investigation. For example, if you want to get the issue of blood spatter analysis, what do you use? You use tools which are scientific in nature. So that is the whole discussion. But I'll share to you this text which are used. They are common text. But if you are into this field, you'll get a lot. So there's one text called Interviewing and Interrogation, a review of research and practice since World War II. It's a full text, 500 something pages. Take time, get onto it. All these which I've discussed here, you'll get there. But I've narrowed them down for this discussion. But in detail, you will get it, including case studies. Even if you go to Twitter or X, LinkedIn, you will get these case studies. So Interviewing and Interrogation, a review of research and practice in World War II. Editors, we have Kevin X. Oxbach, Trong, McFarlane, and Maria Hartug. McFarlane, you can check on LinkedIn. It is there. Even this text you can get on LinkedIn. But for the purpose of this interview, I'll share the text. Then we have another text which I had shown you, which is this text. We have the Investigative Interviewing, Research and Practice, Exploring Supportive Interviewing Practices, 13th edition. So we have 5th edition, 6th edition, 7th edition, 8th edition, but the latest one is the 13th edition. So go and check. They have their website, LinkedIn, get these concepts there. Then I think you'll get a robust engagement with the issue, with the interviewing and interrogation. So before I end, I want to thank you, all of you who have attended this session of interviewing and interrogation. Next time, God willing, we'll engage further. If, for example, the use of, before I end, I want to just highlight the issue of what we call, for example, if you are interviewing vulnerable suspects, what do you consider? There are some certain factors. For example, understand their legal rights, the Miranda warning, I had told you, police caution, for example, in the UK, international standards, the Mendes principle I discussed, understand the purpose of the interview, understand the respective role of the people present in the interview, understand the question asked and the implication, make rational decisions, because obvious, we know human beings are not rational. So because it depends on the context. When you are doing interrogation and interview, make a rational decision. Communicate appropriately, use appropriate communication techniques, utilize non-verbal and verbal use, and reliability. So that's all about this presentation. So we can take some questions. Then thank you all.
The meeting is now open to the Q&A session. Kindly put your question in the comment section or raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask your question.
it's better we can, if you can take an approach of chatting the question, then we can do a discussion. But if you want to raise your hand, you can do it, because this is a wide field. Interrogation interviewing is a wide field. I see one hand. Can you please ask the question?
Unmute yourself to ask the question.
Yes. If you are afraid to ask the question, you can do it by the chat box, and then we can deal with it. But don't be afraid. I'll share the presentation itself. I'll share the text. I'll share the articles, because I have a lot of articles in this field of interviewing and interrogation. Because next year, God willing, I'll be doing a research called the Innocent Project in Kenya. I deal with these people who have been convicted based on full convention. Somebody has confessed, but now the police using forced what do you call pressure, coercion to obtain information from them. So if you want to collaborate on that project, you are welcome. So my email is there. I'll give you my email. I'll give you my contacts for LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. So don't worry. Just these are field we need to grow, because there's little research about this field, because I've been studying about it for a long time. So feel free. I see one hand. Can you please ask that question?
Yes, my name is Syed Mazari. I'm from Karachi, Pakistan. My
Yes.
question is regarding the confirmation bias, the aspect of confirmation bias during the investigation. So my question is specifically about how can investigators mitigate the risk of confirmation bias during the interrogation? That is my question.
So to confront that aspect, you do what we call risk assessment first. So as an investigator, before you delve into an interview or interrogation, you do what you call risk assessment. Because obvious, in any study, in any field, or for example, you want to get some information about this from a suspect, from a victim or a child, for example, or even adult, with that categorization. So you must do what you call risk assessment. You must consider that, see how you can confront. If there's a challenge, then you see how you can confront that challenge. So you do the risk assessment aspect of it, then see how which principle can you use. For example, there is what you call, you're talking about cognitive bias, or what kind of bias? I didn't hear well.
I'm talking about the confirmation bias. There is a concept in psychology that when we conduct an investigation, the investigator contains certain type of confirmation bias in it himself. So, which leads toward the false direction and leads toward the biased investigation. That's what I'm trying to ask. How can an investigator mitigate that confirmation bias during the interrogation process?
Okay. When I share this text, I think you will when there's a part in this text. Thanks for that question. So there is this part of this text called the psychology of self-regulation. So there is that psychology, because you are coming from a psychological point of view, and then because you are dealing, for example, in the aspect of cognitive interview. So if we want to confirm that bias, then now there is this concept of psychology of self-regulation. So I think because I didn't delve deeply into that area, but I think this principle assists. You can check this principle later, because I don't know deeply the concepts of it, of psychology of self-regulations. So you can check it later if I share the text, and then you can see how do you confront that bias, that confirmation bias. Thanks for the question, but that area I've not dealt with it deeply, but I know that area, because I've read the text. I know, but deeply I haven't got deeply. But you can check on the psychology of self regulation and this aspect. So there are two aspects there you need to check: psychology of self-regulations. Number two is a strategic use of evidence. Strategic use of it to confront that bias confirmation. So there are two principles there. One is psychology of the self-regulation, and then strategic use of evidence. So you can check if there is you didn't get well, you can text me by my email, then we can confront that later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes. MK, I see your hand. Okay, you can ask the question. Any other question?
Yes, sir. My name is Shazib and I belongs to criminology. I'm a student of criminology.
Yes,
And
yes.
so my question
Congratulations.
lying inside of sorry,
Yes, 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 yes. I'm hearing you.
am I audible? Okay, sir. My question is that we follow the structure is like a procedure guidelines in investigation process, but the criminal don't follow it. So, beside ethical consideration and all the procedure guidelines, so criminal cannot be captured in a moment. So they feel free to go. So, what should be done to enhance or capture the criminal at the first side and gather investigate evidence without confirming the confirmation bias as a psychological term, the confirmation bias which we collect evidence regarding our perception, our beliefs. So how could we prevent such things in your opinion?
So that's a good question. If you listen carefully about what I told, there's what you call the ABE system. So to confront that issue of bias, then the issue you are talking about the concept of belief. There is that the concept of perception. So what you do, you follow. It is a procedural aspect, for example, because I told you before you do any interview or interrogation as an investigator or a supervisor or in your area of specialty, what you do first is you lay the ground rules for the interrogation or interview. First, you must know whether this suspect is in custody or not custodial or not. And number two, know the intent or the purpose of this interview. What are you going to achieve at the end of it all? What are the results? What do you want to achieve? For example, if you want to confront a suspect to say, for example, a murder happened in this area. When? Why? How? So if you want to use probing questions, how do you utilize those probing questions to get to extract that information? Another key aspect to control these, for example, the procedural guidelines and the ethical guidelines, because ethics form the foundation of everything. You must observe ethics. There is what you call building rapport. That is the key aspect which cures this bias. So to cure that perception, for example, because you are interacting with a suspect, you want to get information from her or him. And then, because you want to deal again with the issue of what we call deception. For example, if you want to establish whether this person is lying or saying the truth, how do you approach that? If he is a passive liar or an active liar, if somebody is talking the truth or telling liars, so how do you deal with that? So to cure all that process, the first thing you use what you call the OPIC model. This model called building rapport. How do you maintain rapport with the suspect or interview or whatever? What kind of guidelines do you use when you are building rapport? So I invite you to look at what we call the OPIC model. The OPIC model. The OPIC model, let me take you a bit. It is what we call observing rapport based interpersonal techniques for research and training in suspect interview. So that is the kind of model which cures what you call what? The bias you are talking about. So you use that model, you build rapport with the suspect, everything at the end of it all, I think you will get positive result, because that's the kind of practice used worldwide. You cannot skip. This is procedural. What you do, build rapport first, establish the guideline, the risk assessment, lay the ground rules for the interrogation interviewing. Then after that, you use different approaches now to collect the information from the suspect or the witness. Another question? I had asked about evaluation and research. Someone who has gotten it, are there overlapping areas of evaluation and research? Because the peace model, the last part is evaluation. You evaluate the whole process. So is there overlapping, or they're just different concepts, research and evaluation? So you can take home as an assignment, because that's the key area. Another question before I wrap up with some comments. I think no one. Yes.
I'm Kritik, pursuing Masters in Police and Security Studies, sir. First of all, thank you for this insightful session. I have a question about your experience in the field of interrogation, sir. Sir, could you please share a memorable or challenging interrogation experience from your career that highlights the complexities of interviewing in criminal investigations?
So if I gotten your question well, so I'm in the field of criminology. I'm a researcher, but my key research interests are criminal justice, forensics, and victimization. So this area of interrogation and interviewing, it combines these areas of victimization. Number two, this area of criminal justice, because it is a chain from the police to the correctional settings. So that is my key areas of interest. So there are a lot of challenges you confront. For example, challenges you face. For example, if you want to get information, for example, there is these settings, because right now in Kenya, there's a project called the Innocent Project, which I discussed earlier. I want to delve into it based on interrogation and interviewing. But I had done earlier some research. For example, I did a research on it's a sociological paper on religion and crime in Bungoma County, Kenya. So that paper, we did when we were collecting data, we focus on what we call the prisons. So in that paper, we were collecting data from prisons. So we were seeing the issue of lived experience, lived experience criminology. So what is the perception of these offenders in prison? For example, if we were collecting data on, for example, there is this transition from court to prisons. For example, there are some certain offenders, they committed, for example, offenses related to religion. So after that, they go to prisons. But now, when you go to prisons, these people, they develop certain kind of behavior again of what? Of trying to avoid this aspect of this aspect of crime associated with religion. So, but now when you want to get information from them, they don't speak out in that manner. You want to get that information fully, because there is that difficulty in assessing. For example, if you see data, for example, religion and crime, it is not such data you can get easily, because there are few offenders. There are few offenders which they commit crimes related to religion. So that environment, the custodial environment, for example, in prisons, and for example, in custody, in prisons, and then you come to the police. For example, these aspects, because me, where I'm working, I usually go to these police stations. So I wait for example, on Monday, I just go, then because majorly on the weekends, these people are being roughed up by the police. They are being arrested or whatever after these cases of reporting. So I just go there, I get some information from them, utilizing these techniques. But now these techniques, they are not. It needs a lot of application. So because now these techniques are not, though it is widely applicable, but now if you see country like Kenya, they are not that utilized to that extent. So I'm trying to utilize these techniques, the peace model, the maintaining of rapport, all these techniques. It is just on text, but practically it is not. So that is a challenge. But as a researcher, you must develop a thick skin to obtain data and information. So my friend, if you want to we collaborate in this field, no problem. So that is the challenge we need to confront as researchers, as scholars, as practitioners in this field of criminology, this field of forensic science, because they are intertwined. So yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
That's all. Then I'll share the text. I'll share the articles for you to get some deeper insights and get a robust view of the interrogation and interviewing. So thank you all of you for the attendance. I see it's a lot. I've never presented in a lecture for more than 100 people. So thank you all of you for attending, listening to me. So if there is any other question you need about this field, just inbox me via LinkedIn, send a connection request, then we can chat via email or Twitter. I'm there, so I can share some text. We can collaborate. You can do. I have a lot of friends from your country, India. So thank you, and may God bless you.
Thank you, everyone. As we come to the close of this insightful session, it is my privilege to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Ivan Skiprop, whose expertise and insights have made today's webinar on interrogation and interviewing in criminal investigation truly remarkable. Now I request Ms. Neha Roy to present the token of appreciation on behalf of Y Crime and Forensic Fusion. Please accept this token of appreciation as a symbol of our gratitude for your outstanding contribution. A special thank you to Mr. Kiprop to your detailed and thought-provoking discussion on the principles of interviewing and interrogation, their relevance in criminal investigation, and the philosophy behind these techniques in the fields of forensics and criminology. Your expertise and research-driven approach has provided us with invaluable insight into the art and science of effective investigative practices. We deeply appreciate the time and the efforts you dedicated to preparing and delivering such an engaging and informative presentation. Your commitment to advancing the fields of criminology and criminal justice is truly inspiring. Thank you once again, Mr. Kiprop, for sharing your knowledge with us today. We look forward to more opportunities to learn from you in future and wish you continued success. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a great evening ahead.
Bye.
Bye everyone.